So here's the site. Here's one of the aerial photographs that we took here, and I'm going to put where we are, one finger there, and then I'm going to point to another on the opposite side of Shiloh. There's two main theories about where the tabernacle was. One of them is where we're at, okay, and the other one is on the other side where I'm pointing right here. You can see a tabernacle in there, can't you? Okay. Up until last year, even, I was pretty persuaded that it was this one on the opposite side. But since last year, I'm persuaded that it's here. And I'll tell you why. There is pretty intriguing evidence for the other side, and I'll take you there and show it to you. And at this time that I took this photograph, you see that Ruth is, she was digging all through this area. But the reason she has come to the conclusion that it was here, it wasn't her idea. One of the early Danish, it was a Danish excavation here, back in the 1920s, established that this is where the tabernacle was. Then some interesting evidence came up over there that definitely had my attention and Ruth's, and so she excavated. After excavating over there and considering everything, I'm pretty persuaded that it was here. And for one reason, and one reason only. What do you think it is? One thing on top of another. That's an ancient mosque sitting on the floor, the remains of a floor of a church.
Byzantine church?
Yes, a Byzantine church. And in fact, on the mosaic floor of this church, it was found the inscription Shiloh, for the people of Shiloh, which is one of the major evidences to identify this site as Shiloh in the first place, that and where it's geographically located. The Bible says that from Bethel, where we're going to go in a few days, from Bethel you come up the road to Shechem, which is where we just were, and it's on the right side of the road, the Bible says. And that's where this is. And then we have this floor with the name Shiloh on it. So, and it would make sense. This is the city itself, and so this is a nice flat area here for a tabernacle to be set up, and this is where all the archaeological one thing on top of another activity is. So let's talk about that, and then I'll take you over to the other side and show you the other evidence. Can I set this down right there? Now, I want to go over something with you here that I haven't gone over with you. Yeah, or it can just sit there. Okay, so I want to go over a trip that I went on a few years back. I was sitting in my office. We still lived in Jerusalem. I was sitting in my office and I was reading a book by a guy named Redford. And I read, and he's a secular archaeologist, and I read this quote. It says, for a half century, it has been generally admitted, so he's writing about a site that is in Sudan today. Okay, in ancient times that's part of Egypt, but today it's in the Sudan. So he's talking about an inscription that was found there in the 1950s in an excavation. So he says this: for a half century, it has been generally admitted that we have here the Tetragrammaton. That just means four-letter, name of God. The name of the Israelite God, Yahweh. And if this be the case, and listen to what he says, as it undoubtedly is, the passage constitutes a most precious indication of the whereabouts. Here's the date of this inscription: during the late 15th century BC, about 1410 BC, contemporary with the end of Moses' life, according to biblical chronology, of the enclave revering this God. Okay, I rushed to the excavation reports in the library. This is the temple built by Amenhotep III, who is the pharaoh of the conquest. And in it, he lists his foreign enemies. And one of them, he identifies as the nomads of Yahweh. What a better way. This is contemporary with the end of the wilderness wanderings. What a better way to describe a people who are following their God named Yahweh as a pillar of fire at night and a cloud by day than the nomads who worship Yahweh. He didn't call them Israel, he called them by a much more important name than Israel. Here it is on the excavation report. Okay, really fast hieroglyphic lesson. This means land. The slash up here. The rest are like letters. They carry a phonetic sound. The rest of the hieroglyphs. These three right here sound out the name Shazu. Shazu, land of the Shazu, which translates nomads. Land of the nomads. And then these four letters here, these one hieroglyph is double feather, which is the Yah, followed by the house, the H, okay, followed by the noose, which is the W sound, and then followed by the W-E, the bird, way. Yahweh, 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 Yahweh. Land of the nomads of Yahweh. I was so excited. I went and got a ticket and went to Sudan. Wow. And rented a driver in a four-wheel drive vehicle. That's where I slept on my trip. Took 3 days of traveling. Okay. No luxury vacation. To get to the temple of Amenhotep III at Soleb in Sudan. And here today is that inscription.
Oh, wow.
Now there's many inscriptions that have been found that mention the name of the God Yahweh. Okay? This is the oldest. 15th century BC. Remember Exodus 3? That happened just before this time period where Moses sees the burning bush and he comes over to the burning bush and God is commissioning him to go and he's going to set his people free. And Moses asks for God's name and God tells him, I am who I am. Tell him I am have sent you. I am is what the name means, but the name itself is Yahweh. And so, and then within Moses' lifetime, we have it on an inscription, and then we have many inscriptions from the 13th century, from the Moabite stone has it that I was talking about from the 9th century. We saw the silver amulets from the 6th century that have the name. We saw that other inscription in the Israel Museum that mentions it from the 6th century. So many of them, in fact, that verse where God reveals his name, God says, this is the name that I am to be called. Yahweh is the name that I am to be called from generation to generation forever. And we have these inscriptions from that time all the way down through. This is where Yahweh lived for over 300 years. One thing on top of another, probably right there.
Wow.
And of course, this is where the tabernacle was, the Holy of Holies in the tabernacle, God's presence. Here is where the nomads of Yahweh, in this 15th century BC inscription, this is where they first settled for the first 300 years when they were in the land here, until the ark was taken to battle at Aphek and the Philistines captured it. Okay, and then the news came back. That was the end of Eli. He died. And Samuel becomes the judge, prophet, leader of Israel.